If the idea of New Year's resolutions is a bit of a joke, and setting and maintaining a habit is a bit of a joke for individuals with ADHD, what exactly does that say about New Year's resolutions for us? Okay, so it's not really a secret that by this time of the year, pretty much everyone is starting to fall off the train in terms of keeping up with their goals and their New Year's resolutions and all of that jazz. And I do want to emphasize, like, as you're watching this and probably sitting here going, I've fallen off the wagon a little bit. One, it's very normal. Like, if you actually look up goal setting jokes, all of the jokes are about New Year's resolutions. And like, I'm going to open a bar and title it New Year's resolutions. It'll be a gym for the first month and a bar for the rest of the next 11. It's a joke for everyone, but it especially can be challenging for individuals with ADHD because of our brain chemistry. And so I want to give you some tips about getting back on the bike, so to speak, and getting your rail, keeping your year moving forward, basically. So before we get too far, let's examine why this happens for individuals with ADHD more than any other segment of the population, because I think there is some power in understanding like why something happens so that we can then avoid it from a little bit more informed place in the future. So there are three major reasons why goals slip, especially for individuals with ADHD. The first is we get overwhelmed. It's too many changes all at once. And I don't know about y'all, but if you've ever gotten to like one of those goal setting, like fueled moments of like, I can change the world. And then, reality crashes back in the next day because you decided that you were going to go from waking up at 8 in the morning to waking up at 5 a.m. You were going to go from not doing any working out to like going for a run every single morning. You were going to drink like 8 glasses of water before you even started work for the day. And the problem is we just have too many changes all at once. And so then we can't keep up with all of it and with the regular day-to-day of running our lives. And so we get overwhelmed, and what happens is the new stuff falls off. Number 2 is a lot of times when we are in goal setting mode, we operate from a place of very rigid expectations. In terms of, we have this idea, right, that like, we're going to be able to spend 2 hours a week on this project. But life happens and life gets in the way. So that's one piece of it. But the other piece that we have to keep in mind is that the ADHD brain thrives on flexibility. And so finding something, there is value in having consistency and habits in some areas. But like one thing I have learned in particular for my morning routines, right? Because this is an area where I see a lot of people go, oh, I've got to set a morning routine. And they try and find the perfect combination of 5 minutes here and 12 minutes here and 13 minutes. And what I've personally found is that I'm going to spend a rough chunk of time on this type of activity and a rough chunk of time on this type of activity. And then by allowing myself to have some flexibility in one, the amount of time and what exact activity happens here and here, right? Personal development and then creativity development. I am able to stay more engaged and keep up the consistency of that routine because I need that flexibility. A lot of times when we go into goal setting mode, we don't leave room for flexibility, either in terms of life happening or in terms of like our brain needing something new and novel. And the third reason that we tend to run into problems and start to slip when it comes to goal setting is we end up with a dopamine drop. So if you know much about the ADHD brain, you know that the ADHD brain has a challenge in the regulation and production of dopamine. That leads to a whole slew of issues. It's a little bit of a simplification there, but the reality is dopamine is a feel-good hormone. It is a motivation hormone. We get a lot of it when we're in goal setting mode. And then when we are in goal fulfilling mode, we don't tend to have nearly as much because like doing and the stuff to get to your goals is a lot harder than like setting the goal and being excited about that. And so we had a lot of dopamine. We were very motivated and excited, and this was going to be the year. And then when it comes down to the actual like tire meets the road moment, we don't have as much energy or motivation to put into it. And so we end up with this dopamine drop that then just leads to us kind of spiraling and thinking, well, oh my God, it's just getting worse. So let's talk about some ADHD-friendly ways to reset first. Then we're going to talk about building some dopamine-driven momentum. And then I'm going to give you some tips and tools that will help you with staying consistent here. So first things first, when you realize that you have slipped, it is really important to revisit your goals. Don't try and reset from scratch, because when we reset from scratch, we tend to create the same problems we had last time. So go back to the goals that you had. And I want you to start to ask yourself a few questions. Like, first and foremost, are they too big? Like, were they too aggressive? Did you set, when I teach goal setting, I talk about like SMAC goals. So specific, measurable, achievable, compatible, and something you're willing to execute with consistency. And it's really important to recognize that achievable is different for you versus me. And in fact, you of today's level of achievable is different from you of tomorrow or you of yesterday's level of achievable. So did you set goals that were too big, that were not achievable for you. Secondly, were the goals too vague? Did you sit here and say, I want to be happier this year? But the problem is that happiness is really hard to measure. And so you were sitting here saying, I don't want to be upset anymore when I get into the weekends and need the whole weekend to recover. But you didn't set specific activities, goals, or things to do that would allow that to happen. Third, was the goal yours? That may sound really weird, but I do want to draw some attention here because this is one that I have seen again and again and again, in that we tend to set goals that are someone else's goal. We set a goal that we don't care about, we're not passionate about, but everyone else seems to think it's important. And because our brains have been like programmed to prioritize fitting in with the herd, we have internalized that as our goal. For example, I talked for a long time, I used to have a goal to have a G7, a Gulfstream, a GS7, right? So the Gulfstream 7, the really nice fancy one. And like a big part of me was like, oh, well, I want it because it's an example of like, if I have to have a plane, it's because I have to be traveling and I'm important. And it supposedly meant all these things to me. But the more I dug into the more I realized like, that goal is not mine. That was a goal that people that I looked up to had. And so I took that goal and said, yeah, I want this goal as well. But that was never my goal. If that happens, great. I don't care, but I don't want that as something I am actively working towards. So once you've evaluated your existing goals, now you can either break them down further or you can reset them. Was it too big? Great. Let's reset it to something that is doable for you. And in this moment, I want you to focus on finding like 1 to 3 actionable steps that you can take this week. And that may come down to saying, you know what, I have 6 goals here. I'm going to take this step to move this one forward. And then my second step is going to be revisiting this list next week and doing the same thing. Evaluate the goals, pick 1 to 3 steps, one of which is going to be a step to move one forward, and one of which is going to be, I will sit down and do this again next week. And then last but not least, now that you have a plan, I want you to actually put some visual reminders in places that will help you like actually remember to go do the thing you were supposed to do. So for example, let's say your goal was to drink more water every day, and you have decided that you're going to make that specific because it was too vague, and you're going to make it a goal to drink at least 3 glasses of water before lunch every single day. So what you may do is go put a sticky note like on the cupboard that you go to when you go to get your coffee cup in the morning that says get a glass of water. And then maybe you put another one like at your desk that says get a glass of water, so that as soon as you sit down for work that day, you get a glass of water. And then you may choose one that is like as you're leaving the office for lunch, you put it like on the back of the door so that you see it and it says get a glass of water. But find some visual reminders to help keep yourself on track here. Okay, so we've talked about why we fall off. We have talked about some ADHD-friendly ways to reset. Let's talk about how do we create dopamine-driven rewards. First things first, I want you to look at how are you going to create some like micro rewards basically for small wins. Now, I don't want this micro reward to be, and I'm going to say food-based, but primarily I'm talking about like sugar or like flour carbs based. The reason for that is that creates a false dopamine spike in the body, and it creates a whole bunch of other issues. So let's avoid doing like I can have an Oreo when I finish my goal. Instead, I want you to find things that create a dopamine return, but maybe necessarily aren't exactly like food related. It could be that you buy a special tea blend that doesn't have any sugar in it, and you get to make yourself like a really lovely little latte, sugar-free latte, at the end of completing this task. Or you may decide, you know what, I need the dopamine like at the start of the task in order to get through the task. I'm allowed to make this latte when I sit down to do this task. Maybe it's your bookkeeping and you hate doing that. Find some little like micro rewards for small wins. Even if like the small win is 10 minutes working on that bigger goal. And this can be stuff like, you know, for a long time, I would sit there and I would say, hey, I'm allowed to read another 5 books or another 5 pages in the book that I'm reading. Or I'm allowed to have 30 minutes to go write on this book that I'm writing that I really, really, really want to get into and really want to write on. And I would give myself like little rewards that were things I really wanted to do, but that I might not allow myself to do otherwise, but that were easy to do. This was not like, oh, I'm going to take a spa day that required me to schedule it and plan it and book it and like drive down there somewhere and be around people. That's a much bigger reward, and that can't be something that I'm doing to create little dopamine rewards to pull myself forward. Number 2, I want you to start incorporating sensory triggers. When you are working on your goals, on achieving your goals, I want you to start to incorporate some candles or music or lighting that you put on specifically when you are working on your goals for yourself. Maybe this is a special, find a candle that you really love that becomes your goal achieving candle. You only light this candle when you are working on your goals for the future. And that scent will start to become something you associate with dopamine releases, especially if you light this candle when you do your goal setting for the year, or when you reset your goals. You will start to associate this candle with a release of dopamine. Your body will actually start to give you that return right off the bat. Okay, so a few quick tools and tricks for staying consistent. There are a ton of these tools out there, so I want to encourage you to find the ones that you need, but there's stuff like Goblin Tools that is great at breaking down, hey, I've got this big goal, let's break it down into tiny little fractional steps so that I can have something really simple, go, do the dishes. Goblin Tools will break it down into walk into the kitchen, turn on the water, plug the sink and fill it with soap. It will make it really, really easy for you to actually have a step-by-step, which is so nice sometimes for our brains, because sometimes we just don't have the extra capacity to figure out I want to achieve this goal, but literally what is the first step? Because it's just, I know I'm not alone with that one. You've got stuff like Habitica, which is a really fun gamified goal setting app. In fact, there's a bunch of gamified goal setting apps out there that will help you build habits, that will help you move towards achieving your goals, that give you check marks and little dopamine releases just for having the app up and running consistently. I use one that's called Simple Time Tracker, and I get dopamine just from seeing the colors in there and starting and stopping and seeing the percentages of time going to each of my activities and did I hit my goal hours for each week on each activity? That is where I get my sense of dopamine from. It's a weird one, but it works for me. So I want you to find an app that does work for you. If you need to be time blocking, maybe try a Simple Time Tracker. If you need to be getting accountability for setting and doing your goal activities each day of the week, then maybe get Habitica or something. If you need help breaking things down, check out Goblin Tools. The other thing I would encourage is look into getting an accountability partner of some variety. And I would encourage that one, you need to decide which one's going to work better for you. In my experience, especially individuals who are busy, like entrepreneurs, we tend to do better meeting on more of a quarterly basis than we do meeting more frequently than that, weekly or monthly. So I would highly encourage you to look into, should I get an accountability partner to meet once a quarter? Put it on your calendar. That becomes a date you do not move unless the world is ending, because you need to be accountable to show up to your accountability meeting. And then go ahead and put a little reminder in your calendar for what to work on leading up to that accountability meeting, so that you don't get to the end of the quarter and go, oh crap, totally forgot here. One last quick little tip that I'll give you in this arena is don't be afraid to tie new habits or actions you want to start taking consistently to existing activities. It is a lot easier if you will say, hey, you know what? Every time I get up from my desk, I am going to do 5 squats. Than it is if you say, you know what? I am going to start doing 50 squats a day, right? Every time, you can tie a new activity you want to be doing to an existing activity, and it's going to be so much easier to implement. You may have to set some visual reminders to help yourself remember, but it will be so much easier to implement. The last thing that I'll throw out there for you is this idea that gave me a lot of freedom when I found it a while ago about goal setting. And it comes from a Zig Ziglar quote that is, what I get by achieving my goals is not nearly as important as who I become by moving towards my goals. And I think that's the Stephanie butchering variation of that quote, but the idea behind it is the same. This idea that when we set a goal and we move towards that goal, sometimes it's like standing at the end of a Scooby-Doo hallway. And as we step forward towards the goal that is at the end of that hallway, we can now see down these doors and we can see what's inside of these rooms. And we may step forward and realize, yeah, what's in this room and what's in this room, not for me, not a big deal. And then step forward again. But there we may find that what's in this room is more aligned with me. And at that point in time, I want you to give yourself some slack and some flexibility to say, I get to change direction at this point, because you're still making forward momentum. Now, if you're changing your goals because you're not making any momentum, that's different. But if you are making momentum and you are changing your goals, there is no reason that you have to complete that original goal if it is no longer the thing that is serving you best. Cut yourself some slack, give yourself some flexibility, and recognize that this is a huge piece of who we are, and that falling off doesn't mean failing. It just means we're human. So pick one thing today to focus on and build from there. And remember this, that January is just the beginning. It's not the finish line. You may have started really strong, because we all do. In every race, you have all the energy from eating well the day before and resting really well, but it is how you finish that matters. So even if you are having to slow down a little bit as you're getting going into the year, it's 100% okay. You got this. Like this? Don't forget to like and follow for more.